Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Fortune India BTS. It's that time of the month when we all get together to tell you what went down behind the scenes while we were putting yet another iconic issue together. This one with a Minister Nitin Gadkari on the cover is titled 100 Emerging Stars with the real star of the issue right here. And the real stars on the Fortune team have joined me on this particular recording. Ashu and Keshav, what a pleasure to have you yet again on another recording of BTS.
Hi, Ayush. It's a pleasure to be back. And with one more another
Thanks.
exciting issue and with a most exciting personality on cover,
It
which
is, it is, and that's what we're going to start with. Let's dive right in, Ashu. This is fascinating in terms of the amount of data that we've managed to put together in terms of what's happening with India's highway scene. There's also emerging stars, which we'll get to. But let's start off with the MVP, because you just look around the country, whether you're talking about the Bombay-Goa highway or the focus on the Northeast. You all obviously have the Bharatmala project, fast tags and how they've changed our lives on highways. It's been fascinating to see that so much of this work has been carried out in the last decade, Ashu.
Yeah, yeah. So, in fact, it has been a very fascinating story of infrastructure development. And that has been one of the key areas of the government. And highways sector particularly has turned around really very nicely. If you compare with what was the state of affairs some 10 years back, we were down to 4 kilometer per day of construction. There was so much policy paralysis, which Mr. Nitin Gadkari, the Road Transport and Highways Minister, has talked about in his interview. And in fact, he has mentioned about how he used to conduct marathon meetings with all the stakeholders when he took over as the minister of Road Transport and Highways in the ministry. He would call everybody, talk to their issues, talk to their concerns, and address this entire stalling of the highway projects and put things on back. And in the entire journey, a lot of things have been addressed. Policy level issues have been addressed. Financing issues have been addressed. Land acquisition issues have been addressed. And a lot of body of work has gone into highway construction. And that is why we see highways of the state of the art nature and world class nature, which we are having right now.
It's actually fascinating because our editor-in-chief Saurabh Majumdar has also mentioned this in his foreword, which he's titled the Gadkari Roadmap. He says that the National Highways Network has gone up from 91,287 kilometers in 2014
Exactly.
to 146,195 kilometers, as of December 24. And that's what nearly 50 to 60 lakh crore rupee investment in national highway infrastructure projects. That's a very important point because we see some of these things as citizens of India, and then to get to the bottom of it, you need to realize, like you said, the kind of changes in policy, the changes in culture, the change in also effective utilization of capex. Because if you look at the budget over the past few years, there's a lovely graphic that you've shown us in the story as well. The Highways Ministry effectively got a certain amount of budget, and they could utilize that capex in a very effective way. That's also a huge change, Ashu, we've seen over the last, 6 to 7 years based on that graph?
Exactly. That is, in fact, a very big change. Allocation to the highway sector used to be in the range of 40,000, 50,000 crores some 6, 7 years back.
Mhm.
Now, that has completely changed. And if you look at the overall capex allocation in the budget, out of the 11 or 12 lakh crore that is given every year, highways comprises at least 25 to 30% of it. And it is not that the money has been allocated and it is not being utilized or something of that sort. In fact, even as we speak, in the previous financial year, the entire money has been utilized, and that has been so in the last 3 4 years. So while allocation is up, the on ground utilization by the ministry is also up, which essentially means that there is a lot of appetite for these projects. These projects are being absorbed. That money kind of is going into the economy. And when we talk in terms of highways, it is not only in terms of highways only. There are a lot of tertiary sectors which get benefited out of it. We talk about cement when it comes to highways. We talk about steel when it comes to highways. So a lot of secondary demand is also generated in the economy with the kind of investments that have gone into these sector. And also very shortly, I would like to point out that it's not about only highways. It's all, it's all about the logistics cost in the economy. While we are somewhere around 16-17%, the overall aim of the government, as Mr. Gadkari pointed out in the interaction that we had with him, is to bring it less than 9%. And if that aim is achieved, he said that our exports could, grow by 1.5 times. So these are the big perspectives that we are talking about highways. So it is just not development of highways only, but it is an overall holistic, push to the entire infrastructure and logistics side of the economy.
Keshav, I think that's an interesting point because, like Ashu was mentioning, there's so much more than just highways. When you're talking about that infrastructure push, there's secondary industries that are benefiting from it. There's so much more happening with the economy. Also, smart mobility. You look at the mobility sector, and I know Mr. Gadkari is also a proponent of EVs and how we can really take that leap into the future. If you do take the Mumbai-Pune highway, for example, or even across Delhi, you see EV charging stations coming up as well. Even the private sector is really managing to benefit and contribute to this whole revolution, Keshav.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason. In fact, we were, thinking of what would be the right nomenclature that you would go with Gadkari, and that's because he's more seen as a guy who builds infrastructure, but he's equally passionate about mobility, and that's why the whole headline came about the alchemist.
Yes.
So it's a transformational journey that he has taken. It's not just infrastructure; it's you're overlaying mobility on top of it and green mobility. Electric vehicles, and that is something that he spoke in deep. And Ashu, you would like to touch upon that? So in fact, more than roads and highways, he was more passionately talking about the fact that how he's electrifying the public mobility space.
In fact, we asked him as to what kind of resistance he has faced from the traditional automakers,
Yes.
when it comes to green mobility and all. And he was very candid in telling us that he has faced a lot of resistance, but he was very happy about the fact that, all these ideas, the new breakthroughs are now being accepted by the industry. And he also mentioned about the hydrogen buses, the prototypes that he had launched. And then he was also talking about flex fuel, about sourcing fuel for the economy from the rural areas, and how we can cut our fuel import bill if we rely on all these green fuel and the from the rural segment, whatever supplies we could kind of fetch. So all those ecosystems he is very, very, in fact, passionate about. And he delved a lot in our interaction. And he's of the view that actually, with the greening of the economy, the largesse should be distributed across. It should not be a particular segment that should benefit, but it should be all the sectors of the economy should benefit, ranging from the urban to the rural side of it.
It's fascinating, Ash, you say that, because I remember covering the auto sector as well. When the first made in India, assembled in India Mercedes EQS came about in Chakan in Pune, Mr. Gadkari was the first one to come and test it, drive it out. With the Mahindra EVs that we are also passionately looking forward to, the XEV 90 and the B6, Mr. Gadkari had tested those as well. So I think it's kind of interesting to see that sort of passion then translating into action as well, because we are seeing this developing as we speak. But obviously you had the good fortune of meeting him and working closely to understand how to put this story together, and that's the whole point of BTS. We've hosted him at a couple of top conferences as well, and I must say he is candid in terms of the things he mentions on stage, the anecdotes he shares. They're quite fascinating. But just looking towards the future, you mentioned a bunch of emerging technologies and some things that we can look forward to. If you talk about the hike in the ministry's budget, Ashu, there's no real hike in 25-26, right? That's what I understand. But according to Mr. Gadkari, India will be approving future highway projects under Vision 2047. Is that the way forward? What is the future when we're building from this story, Ashu?
See, one thing he mentioned very clearly, that his plan is to construct highways at the pace of 100 kilometers per day. That is what his target is. And he said that, I mean, he also specifically pointed out that it's a target, it's not a declaration that he is making. But that said, it essentially means that the government will actually very aggressively go behind that target. Right now, we are at around, say, 38 or 40 kilometers of construction, highway construction per day. So from that level to 100 kilometers a day, which essentially means,
Three times.
yeah, 2.5 time jump. When you look at the larger picture, what it essentially translates into is from the current level of about 12,000 or 13,000 odd highways that are being constructed annually, it would go around somewhere around 40,000 kilometers annually. So that is the kind of big numbers that we are talking about. Secondly, one of the mega plans of the ministry is on upgradation of the highways to 4 levels. So we going forward we will have a large number of highways getting upgraded to 4 lanes. So those are the big plans of the government. As far as the funding is concerned, one thing is very clear now, that the government will not rely on central government funding, because the government's point of view is that a lot of handholding has happened, in fact. And in the meanwhile, while central government took the highway development on its own balance sheet, in the meanwhile, innovative funding models have come up, and all those models will be actually used to pump money into the sector. Plus, the government is also reviving the public-private partnership mode of highway construction, which will in fact lead the highway construction in the country. And he is very confident. He has very confidently said that money is not a problem. In fact, there are various other models which have now matured. For example, the InvITs and all, for which he mentioned there are a lot of investors are coming. In fact, he was very candid to tell us that money is not a problem. In fact, implementation capability is an issue. The DPRs are an issue. So we need to develop our own strengths on that side. So this is basically the way forward: 100 kilometer per day and PPPs with innovative funding models.
And the most important thing is, as always, the design team at Fortune India has done a fantastic job getting this portrait shot and designing this cover. And I know, Ashu, you and our editor-in-chief, Saurabh Majumdar, did actually meet Mr. Gadkari as well. How did he react and respond to this cover? Was he as pleased as the rest of our readers are?
No, no, he was very happy to have a look at the cover. He was very excited that we have covered all aspects of the highway construction in the country, beginning from the challenges that were there a decade back, the funding problems, the innovative funding models that have come up. In fact, we have not just talked only about the business of highways. We have also mentioned, the story has a flavor of the entire personality of Mr. Gadkari. So that is also one very important aspect. In fact, our readers will get to know Mr. Gadkari more once they go through this entire copy.
See, this is Keshav, a behind the scenes of the behind the scenes. Ashu's revealing things to us from that real story. That's the whole point and premise of this. There's more, right,
Very,
Keshav?
very few politicians are as colorful and as open as
Yes.
Mr. Gadkari. He wears his heart up his sleeve, and he's not political about whatever. In fact, he's a politician who would rather, get into problems because of his speeches.
He's definitely very candid, and he knows exactly what the audience wants to hear. But tell me,
For example, sorry to interrupt. For example, if you ask somebody who has created a mammoth infrastructure like a Delhi-Bombay expressway, you'll ask somebody that, what is your biggest achievement? You will expect him to say, I have constructed the Delhi-Bombay expressway. But here is a guy, is so humble, so grounded, that he is saying that his biggest achievement in the Ministry of Road Transport is to ensure that the manual rickshaws are removed and the e-rickshaws have taken over, and they have benefited some 3 lakh odd people. And he actually considers that to be his biggest achievement.
so humble, so grounded. I have to share one anecdote. I hosted him just a short while ago at an event, and he shared one of his anecdotes to talk about, look, humility understands humility, I believe. And he spoke about, the great industrialist, the late Ratan Tata, who was visiting him for a meeting in Mumbai's Malabar Hill. And when he told Mr. Tata, saying, can you give the phone to your driver? I will explain the directions to come to the location of the meeting. Mr. Tata told him, saying, I don't have a driver, I'm driving myself. I think that the audience really really appreciated that sort of a story. And there's stories like that, which I'm really looking forward to. Honestly, there's a lot in this issue. And there's one more piece of something that we need to focus on, Keshav, which is also a very interesting list of 100 emerging stars. Now, often the conversation is always about the top 50 or the top 100, but we've curated very carefully a list of companies that have a lot of potential. Now, I want to understand what the inspiration was for all of us. I know I want everyone to know what the inspiration was for us in the team in our edit meetings to curate this list, and also how we defined emerging, because a lot of people will be watching with bated breath to understand this.
Yeah, Ayush, it was a very, we had quite a bit of, thoughts and talk behind, what would be the next interesting issue listing that could go, outside of the signature Fortune 500, which is an international listing, which we also have it. It's a purely total income, top line driven, sales driven, a listing where the top 500 India's biggest companies are, listed based on their top line. But we wanted to do something where, if you are to look beyond the 500 universe, obviously they are the big movers and shakers of India, but you also have a second rung of companies which are equally exciting and which are equally, growing consistently and robustly. And that's why we decided that let's not just look at total income, as the net sales as the big criteria, but rather add some more filters to it. Like, when you have growing, just not your focus just on growth, you sometimes kind of, sacrifice profitability, you kind of sacrifice your return ratios. So we said, why not look at a combination of all parameters? And that's how we stuck to that. And we said that let's have a 3-year CAGR of, 20% top line growth. And then we would have a 20% net profit growth. And we also said that in none of the 4 years that we will be computing the CAGR, we wanted any loss-making companies. And a garnishing on that would that these companies would have had at least a minimum of 20% CAGR returns in their share prices, though it was a sufficient, but it was not a necessary condition, because there are some companies which have not given 20% CAGR. But the profitability and consistency in growth, that is top line, profitability and return ratios, these parameters together, we, created a kind of listing. And that's what the emerging stars are all about.
And capital efficient operations as well, right? I think that was another one. Also, I remember reading through this piece, which was really well written and designed as always. I love the colors. There was actually a whole mention of, you're talking about 100 emerging stars, but also a lot of them, a big chunk of them making, annual profits of over 100 crore rupees as well.
Yeah. So in the scheme of things, 100 crore is not very significant, because these are very small companies. In fact, they are for 4,000 crore top line companies and below. So, but the thing is that more than the absolute size of profits, it's the quality of profits. And when I mean quality, means they have been consistently growing their profits, or at least they have stayed profitable in each of the 4 years. And that's where, interestingly, one of those companies, even Ashutosh has written about. It's an FMCG company, but the most interesting aspect of the listing is that the top company is Ahluwalia Contracts, and it is one big beneficiary of not just the infrastructure spending, but also the boom in real estate. So it turned out to be the top-notch, the number one on our list. So it was a fascinating list spread across sectors and largely consumption-driven, IT, engineering, auto ancillaries, just about the entire gamut that you could think of. So I think we will not get too much into what the companies are all about. Then it takes away the fun of what the listing is.
Of course, it's interesting you mentioned this in Ashu's story as well. It was a revelation to me as well. That's why I request everyone to subscribe and read and consume our content. Because having lived in Mumbai for so long, I didn't know that the whole Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus renovation was also being undertaken by this company, Ashu. I thought this was a company largely pertaining to projects in North India, but it's here, one of our crown jewels here in Mumbai, which is also a project they've taken up, Ashu.
That is, in fact, one of the biggest projects that they will be implementing now. In fact, there were certain issues, design and structural issues.
Yeah.
All those issues have now been addressed, as we have reported in the copy, and the entire rehash, so to say, of the Chhatrapati Shivaji railway station will begin.
No, absolutely. I think it's fascinating. Also, while we are looking at this, just one more bit, Keshav, because you've got defense, you've got logistics. This list cuts across sectors. It's actually quite comprehensive. We shouldn't undersell it. It's a lot of research that you and the team have done. But were there any sectors that surprised you saying, oh my God, based on our criteria, these companies are doing surprisingly well, and these are sectors which tell you a larger story about India and how the Indian economy is really maturing?
I mean, there was nothing surprising, but it was interesting to see a lot of mid-sized engineering companies doing well. Also, the mid-tier IT companies, like Tata Elxsi, which were like surprisingly, they're doing quite well in terms of growth. And what you call it, this whole disruption that we keep talking about, AI and all, how it is going to kind of hit spending. But it seems to be there is a whole cohort of mid-sized tier IT companies which are clearly doing well. So it has been, in fact, surprises galore, for you to say, across the list.
So, okay, now since you're saying surprises galore only with this particular story, but are there surprises galore? I know we also have the Unwind edition as well, which Saurav has spoken about in his forward. But are there any other surprises that subscribers, readers, consumers of our content can expect with this issue?
I think one, obviously, the big story on Gadkari, but if you are an investor, the emerging stars will give you a bird's eye view of some of the companies, and especially now that the markets is already kind of, come down a bit because of the macro geopolitical scenario playing out. So, I mean, if we have also kind of showed what kind of valuations a lot of these companies are trading at. And in fact, now at the current levels, they have become all the more attractive place. So investors who are interested in kind of, buying into the story, maybe this is a good time to dip it.
Absolutely. Fascinating content here, of course, that we were talking about in our behind the scenes, but there's so much happening across our social media, on our new revamped Fortune India website, which looks absolutely amazing. We're keeping you up to date, Ashu and team, Keshav, all of us are trying to contribute there. It is credible, responsible reporting. And honestly, like Keshav was mentioning, one of the rationale for our emerging stars was quality. And I think that's something we focus on a lot over here. And we strive to and hope to continue to do that in the days to come. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Ashu. Thank you, Keshav, for joining.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in the next one.